All right, everybody, welcome to the Heroes of Agape podcast. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Jeremy, formerly known as Hardy, Chief Master Sergeant Hardy in the Air Force. Welcome, Jeremy. It's a privilege to have you on the show.
It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, thank you. And Jeremy's we have a lot of experience together already, working with plant medicines, facilitating retreats together. He's been a volunteer with us here at Agape Church, especially for the Heroes of Agape program. He's also a part of the future of Agape Heroes. We have a bit of an announcement to make in the podcast, so you'll have to stick around for that when it's appropriate. We won't be spoiling it at the beginning of the show.
Right.
But nonetheless, he's going to be a huge proponent for the program and the future of what that looks like for us here at Agape Church. So we're very privileged to have him here and to share him with you and his story with you. So Jeremy, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience?
Sure. Appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm Jeremy. As Sergio said, retired Air Force Chief Master Sergeant. I spent 25 years in pararescue, which for the uninitiated is combat search and rescue for special operations forces. So we like to say we're the 911 for the SEALs. I did that for 25 years. And, obviously we don't go to work unless somebody else is having a really bad day. So a lot of combat experience in that, a lot of unfortunate things that we contend with. But yeah.
No, excellent. And you were active duty for how many years?
25 years.
25 years. That's amazing. I thought 6 years was a long time. 25 sounds like a lot longer.
You get numb after about 12,
Yeah, of course. And what areas did you operate in while you were active duty?
Worldwide. So I think at last count, 74 countries.
Wow.
But primarily, obviously the Middle East, did some work in Europe, in the Balkans. A lot of work down in South America, working at counter-narcotics pre-9/11, and then Africa.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so you globetrotter, right?
Yeah. I'm waiting for the war. I'm waiting for the world to go to war with the Bahamas because all those 74 countries were not fun.
Yeah, anywhere tropical. That's amazing. Yeah, and it's you have a very particularly interesting background in your Air Force career, some of it historical, some recognized, by the elites in all four branches as very honorable missions that you partook in. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you.
I know very recently our friends at the Medevac podcast had you on their show, and you dived really deeply into that story and that background with your experience. What was the name of the general that you were involved
General
with?
Dave Goldfein.
Yeah, Dave Goldfein, and rescuing him. So anyone who's interested in really getting to know the ins and outs of Jeremy's military background and experience, I'd highly recommend you check out our friends at the Medevac podcast. They did an excellent job in interviewing him, so we don't want to beat a dead horse today. Sure. And give you the same content. What we're really excited to have you here today, Jeremy, is so that we can dive into what brought you here in the first place.
Sure.
What introduced you to Agape Church, and that is the entheogenic retreats, the spiritual retreats that we offer, and specifically the ones for veterans.
Yeah.
As I recall, the first time you came to us was for a veterans retreat, of which we really appreciate your trust. I know you had already been working with the plants, before
Right.
you came to us. So can you explain, to the audience where your head was when you came here, what
Sure.
that process looked like, and you're investigating into Agape? I'm sure you did your homework before entrusting us into our care.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the story of me coming to Agape, if you don't mind me backing up just a bit.
No, of course.
There was a period of time where I found myself homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Just a series of unfortunate events. And I was reaching out to a friend who was working with an entheogenic church in Florida, and he flew me down. He says, "I want you to try this thing. I want you to try this ayahuasca."
Mm-hmm.
And I was living in a tent. I was like, okay, sure, but I was struggling. I was in a very dark place. I had gone from being the highest ranking special warfare airman in the Air Force to 3 years later, living in a tent literally down by the river,
Wow.
and so it was in a dark place, divorce and, financial ruin and on and on. And I was borderline suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the church and, partook of the sacrament, and it saved my life. It didn't change my life. It saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of one and the same, but I left there a different person. And I knew that my work wasn't done. So I moved from Florida out here to San Antonio, and, I kind of thought I was, done with plant medicines because, I'm not so much an extrovert. So, but we have a mutual friend with the Warrior Retreat Alliance, and he pointed me in your direction. And so at that point, knowing that, I had this small taste of the therapy of the plant medicine and saw the progress that I was making, and then it abruptly ends for, a considerable amount of time as I was making the transition, I was excited to get back into it. And so I was better than I was from, going from the tent to Florida, than from San Antonio to here. But I still wasn't in a good place.
Right.
And, this place has an entirely different philosophy, entirely different feel. I felt immediately at home.
No, that's good to hear. I'm happy that you felt welcomed when you came to us. If you don't mind, I'd love to talk about like what that bad place looked like for you, because I think the audience has a particular idea considering what they know about your background, being combat related and being in the military. But what were some of the specific challenges that you faced in realizing that you needed something other than what was available to you?
Right. Well, first to kind of qualify,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a mental health therapist.
Right.
And obviously I have a background with, in combat trauma, but also developmental trauma. I had a pretty abusive childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So my trauma resume is long. And so coming here, like I said, I'd broken through some really dark, deep, heartfelt secrets that I was going to take to the grave in my first few times with Aya. But that was first aid, what I consider mental first aid.
Right.
We put the tourniquet on. Right, things were stable, but things were still not good.
Right.
And so when I came to you, I was dealing with depression. I'm a recovering alcoholic, so I started drinking again.
Right.
My anxiety attacks were on the rise. I had this brand new job. It was a fantastic opportunity. I really had everything I needed. My company bought me a car, not a company car. They bought me a car.
Wow.
Give me a place to live. I had everything I needed, but I was still miserable.
Right.
And that's based on, harboring those traumas. So as a human, I consider myself, I was about a 45% human when I came to you.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. I had a good 55% of me that was just in absolute turmoil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's pretty common in my observation, at least in working with veterans, that it seems like the human side of the veteran is hibernating. Like they're in hiding almost because it served them while they were in the military. Like there's not a lot of room for emotion when you have to make split decisions that will either save your life or save other people's lives. So it's no wonder. In the previous podcast, I shared the analogy about the bear in the woods, and are you familiar with that already? Yeah. So having that experience where a bear approaches your campsite and you get to leave because you're just camping, you get that heightened state and then return back to baseline versus, being deployed for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, whatever that looked like for you. The bear becomes the baseline.
That's right.
So with that understanding, just to kind of condense that analogy as quickly as possible, it's no wonder why we come back and we function differently, because society, there is no bear. Like their worries are, am I going to get to work on time? Am I going to have a job tomorrow? Like these types of things, rather than life-threatening, situations like we find ourselves in deployed. What did some of the work look like for you in your ayahuasca experience? I know you mentioned that you had some childhood traumas prior to your military experience, as well as, the experience after. But if you can give us just kind of an idea, like a window into the process that you had,
Sure.
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. Obviously, coming into ceremony, I usually have a list of intentions, things that I want to, that, Jeremy wants to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And the ayahuasca says, now we're going to explore something else.
Right.
Typically, right? But every journey was different. But initially, the first time I was here, it went heavy back to combat-related stuff immediately. And I thought I had a handle on that.
Right.
Looking back, like I said, it was a tourniquet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We stopped the emotional bleeding.
Right.
But the wound was still there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that entire weekend, I struggled hard with combat trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as I've been with you for all these. Well, it's been almost a year, right?
Yeah. So we're creeping up on it.
Yeah. So approaching a year. I've been here for you this time. Less and less about the combat stuff, and more and more, and not even the developmental trauma. And I mean, it comes up, briefly, and usually most journeys. But I've kind of evolved into the journeys now are more about refining who I am as a person.
Right.
Right. And I made a list. So these are all the attributes about myself I don't like. Let's explore them in ceremony. And again, I had to make decisions. So, but ultimately that's what it is. So we got to a point where I came in here with a tourniquet on, right? We sutured the wound, stopped the bleeding, and now we're healing.
Right. No, that's amazing. And it's kind of like, for me, almost expected from somebody like you to have a situation like that in your experience and working with the medicine, because you've been trained so well in compartmentalizing situations, right? Like, so if we look at that in a very generalized way, you have a bunch of files that you've set aside for years of experience, like 2 decades, most likely, because I would imagine about 5 years of training was your initial experience in the Air Force, Like, so it takes me back to when I was an insurance agent, you get so caught up in sales, you have to eventually go into your file folder and start clearing out the files that are older than 5 years,
Right.
Like, so that's to make room for what is to come,
Right.
Like, so it's really interesting, because it's the polarity is so skewed for veterans that it's hard to say what they're going to experience, and I think the tourniquet is a perfect analogy in that. Because that is the approach to fixing a severed limb in most cases, right? Like, so you have this gaping wound that is spewing out blood, and you apply the tourniquet to save somebody's life as basically the last resort, right? So ayahuasca works the same way, and that's why intentions are so often, off the mark, is because we're ignoring the gaping wound. We're saying, I don't like when my frayed nails get caught in my blanket. So I'd like to work on that today. And they're like, well, what about your missing leg? So it's kind of one of those things where as I always instruct the people who are coming to the medicine to come with an open mind and not allow your intention setting to become expectations for the medicine, because it leaves you, with an opportunity to be disappointed in that process. Even though, if you look back at your intentions that weren't met in your medicine experience, I promise you, 2 years after, they have been in ways that you didn't expect them to. Like, so it's kind of one of those things where if it's raining outside, you need a roof over your head, but you don't just build the roof and slide underneath a triangle, like you need to set up a foundation, you need to set up poles so that you can walk underneath the roof. And, there's that process. So for me, it's tricky business, like intentions are a beautiful guideline and a tool to be used in preparing the mind, really, and kind of scratching the surface. It's almost like a wellness check, like a looking at yourself in the state that you're in, and then sometimes you do notice that your leg is missing, but other times you don't, So it's kind of one of those things that people have to be open to, and I'm happy that you got to do that up front. Rather than, your relationship being one that was not so much worked initially, because then the opposite would be you being jarred by the experience, and reliving that in a better state of mind, where it resurfaces itself in a way that is interfering rather than helping you. So, so yeah, I'm happy to hear that you're working past that for sure.
On that vein, my personal experience with the intention setting. It's good to have goals, right? Good to have a mindset of coming in, and there's something therapeutic about writing those down. It's like journaling. You're writing down these intentions, but especially, as you're growing in the medicine, you don't know what you need. Like your mind does, your heart and soul knows, and ayahuasca helps with communicating with those. So your intention might be to work on your marriage, but before you can do that, you got to work on yourself, right? And so that's where I agree that don't set your heart on that. An analogy that I thought of on the way up here was the whole tourniquet, right? So the beauty with plant medicines, ayahuasca in particular, is it can be a tourniquet and it can be cosmetic surgery and everything in between,
right?
And but it's a journey, it's a process.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And you hit the nail right on the head. Another way that I explain intentions sometimes being an obstacle rather than a guide is in recognizing that you're utilizing the conscious mind to come to those terms in the first place. So if you could consciously overcome these limitations in your life, you would have done that already.
Correct. Yeah.
But oftentimes the issue that we have is in the programming of who we are and why we are who we are. So you can't reason, you can know all day long how to fix your problems, but the action is missing. Yeah. Your motivation to solve the problem is missing. So it becomes an exercise, where you're at a point, and this is one of the reasons I love plant medicine so much, is that it opens your eyes to this idea that you're not as much in control as you thought you were. And I break that down in the most simple way possible. And I look at the gut biome, how many decisions do you think you're making that are actually being made by microorganisms in your gut telling you need to eat that donut, you need to have another cup of coffee, and it's all because that's what they need, not because that's what you need, and you can know all day that the donut isn't good for you, but you get enough of those guys demanding it, then
that's right.
And their screams get louder and louder, and you're no longer the man that you thought you were.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting, reflection, if you will. Just to realize the same thing's happening with the introduction of entheogens. Where you get to slip out of control for the first time, or the illusion of control for the first time in your life, in most cases, So it's just a beautiful approach to humbling yourself in that way.
Which is super important, particularly with Agape Heroes, right? Your military and first responders are typically type A, typically very control-oriented.
Right.
Which leads to our mental health crisis, the mental health crisis, that demographic. Because the ability to release, just release emotions in general, compartmentalization is necessary to be a law enforcement officer or a paramedic or, a veteran. And that follows through, when we get out and we're, in the civilian community. So the ability to, with the assistance of entheogens, to be able to release that control that you're talking about, That in and of itself is therapeutic. And it allows, your soul knows how to fix your soul.
Exactly.
Right? And all the static of life around us is what keeps the interference between the heart and the soul from talking to each other. And, ayahuasca just quiets it and lets them talk.
Exactly. Yeah. And oftentimes it's just adjusting the volumes, like that's a beautiful analogy too. I love where this is going because the analogies are pouring out. That's good storytelling in my mind. But,
sure.
But it really does, like the hardest conversation to have is with the mind in allowing it to understand that the heart should be heard, like especially for a veteran. You're absolutely right. And it's amazing to me, to have these Agape Hero retreats because initially all of the new veterans want to jump right into being in the military again. Like they start with what was your MOS?
Right.
Where did you deploy?
I'm sure you've seen every retreat.
Yeah, were you marksman? All these, what were you proficient in? Like all these things. And it's kind of funny. I
call it butt sniffing.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just the qualifying. Where do I stand in the pecking order of this situation that requires no pecking order?
Right.
But it's just an interesting dynamic to observe. And from that point on, we go into our first ceremony experience, and afterwards, no one gives a flying shit what their experience was before. All they care about is what they just experienced and what they just revealed about themselves, in that internal journey that they just, had for the first time in their lives in most cases. So
a good example of that, my very first ceremony here, in my introduction, I introduced myself as retired Pararescue Chief Master Sergeant Jeremy Hardy.
I remember it.
And all right. And in my last ceremony, I introduced myself as Jeremy. I used to be in the military.
Yep.
And that's especially from being a guy, like I said, being a senior leader in a special warfare community. I call it the Al Bundy syndrome. Back in high school, and through that touch pump, and I've lived in that past for so long, and I identified with it, and it was through the use of the medicine where I realized that that was a great chapter of my life, but it was a past chapter, and in living in that chapter, I was keeping myself from the future chapter, and I was losing opportunities to grow because I was stuck back there.
Right, of course. Yeah, and it ends up like our story oftentimes becomes an interference for us because they're anvils, and as long as you're carrying them around, you're reminded by these stories, so you're absolutely right. And what I encourage people to do is allow the past to influence, and recognize who it has made you become today. But if those stories only serve the ego or only serve, the narrative of which you want people to believe you are, rather than just expressing yourself in a way that impresses yourself in the same way you want in telling the stories, then you resolve the problem in a more authentic way,
Correct.
How many war stories do you know of mine?
Maybe one or two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's kind of just like, I've been there before, I went to Bagram too, and that's it, and it's because sure, I had experiences, military experiences. I had to chase guys like you around, more often than I'd like, because y'all needed communications, and that was my trade, so combat communications required following people in combat, but I don't allow, and this is just an example. I'm not saying this is something you're guilty of, but to offer, perspective to the audience, I don't allow those situations to dictate who I am today, even though they've already shaped me into who I am today. For me, there's a lot of observer opportunities in my military career. And being involved in communications usually meant I was an asset, not somebody who would respond to fire. So I put up my trust in people like you most times, anyone who was trained to shoot a gun, was taking care of me so that I can get, the helicopter called in or whatever the case was. So I often witnessed a lot of bravery, a lot of just, really interesting dynamics of a human being under stress, So that's what I carry with me is the appreciation of how the human beings can come together in that way and protect each other, even though they're complete strangers. These aren't people that I grew up with, and oftentimes I was helping the Army or the Marines, so they weren't even in the same branch as me,
right.
But for some reason we all protected each other. We all operated. So that's how I shift the narrative. Rather than telling the story from, the first person point of view of like, man, they were shooting at me and
there it was.
And yeah, exactly. It becomes observing it as a whole. And how did that shape me? How did it manipulate the way that I operate? And how have I overcome that situation?
Yeah.
And really taking that, above ground approach to it, like where you're looking at the whole thing play itself out. You start to get to an understanding, and it's very similar to what you experience in an ayahuasca experience, like it's never the reliving of the first person, not never, but, more often than not, it is not reliving the first person experience. It is, reliving it through another person's perspective,
exactly.
Including the enemy's perspective, and finding that compassion, finding the humility to understand what we were actually doing in that process of war, And so it's always just so mind blowing, and,
sure.
and it's different for every veteran, like I would say a majority of the veterans that come to the Agape Hero Program, are dealing more so with childhood traumas than they are with the trauma overseas, and yeah. Partly because our country does a good job of training us, and preparing us for those situations. Yeah, I'd love to get your take on what that looks like for you, like as far as your progress in working with the medicine. Like I understand that you have more than one experience, like, so you've already, you cracked the iceberg, and you've discovered that it's much larger than you had imagined.
The more I heal, the more I know I need to heal. Like there's, we've hit the big, I think, and we haven't even hit all the big stuff, but I've been able to address through ayahuasca some of the largest traumas in my life.
Right.
And that's great because every time it's, you got a big rucksack full of rocks, right? You got a 450-pound backpack on, right? The first 15 pounds you take off, you're not going to notice it, right? And then the next 15 pounds, you might not notice it. And then, as you start taking more and more of these rocks out, you start walking faster, you start feeling lighter, and then, the process becomes more rapid, with the eventual goal that hopefully, you get the backpack empty and then now you just want to keep it empty.
Right.
So I've still got a pretty heavy backpack, but it's a whole hell of a lot lighter than when I came here. I've gotten, and it's not just dealing with trauma. There's, for me, there's, learning gratitude, self-love. Obviously anybody in combat arms, in war is going to do stuff they're not real proud of. Mm-hmm. And that kind of chips away at your self-esteem, especially if it's in violation of your morals, right? Mm-hmm. And that causes a lot of mental health issues, is actions in violation of our moral code, right? Which, if you're a decent human being, that's war, mm-hmm. So being able to chip away at that, the more I chip away at, the deeper. The deeper, more meaningful my journeys are, because we're not stopping major bleeds. Now I'm able to delve into things that are more esoteric, mm-hmm. Or things that are more meaningful, like gratitude, mm-hmm. self-love, like I mentioned, love for your neighbor, being able to feel the energy of the people around you. The big thing for me is. One of my maladaptive coping mechanisms is I withdraw. If I'm not feeling 100%, then I'm going to go get in my cave and, stay there. The medicine has helped me, bring that out. I wouldn't say I'm an extrovert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm far more personal than I was.
I would agree. Yep.
And it's easier for me to engage with the people around me. Because I've learned, I can feel, and I'm not by no means my yogi or anything, but I can feel the energy of the people with me far easier than I ever could before.
Right. Yeah. And I think that plays into really the tone that we set here, in my opinion, because, I've had the privilege of working with some of the communities that you have before, and it was most of the time another good old boy situation, so it felt very familiar to the military experience, and that was what that experience was for me, at least, just recognizing, is this really what I want to surround myself with? A lot of the same old, and part of that played into my experience in the military, expressing something and then people telling me just deal with it, just put your boots on and get the job done. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you're trying to communicate it and then that becomes the situation. That's what continually forces us to set these things aside until we can't deal with them anymore, right. Until they're right in front of our face and we're surrounded by piles of shit we never dealt with, right? So I felt a lot of that when I was working in other communities, people ignoring their experiences and just talking about the pretty colors and the pretty lights instead of the substance, the actual what is the work that you're doing,
right.
And it was because they didn't want to feel weak around each other, what we try to do at Agape Heroes retreats is stifle that immediately, take those pieces of armor away from the individuals who are participating so that they understand that it's a safe and vulnerable place to express and to heal, it's like you can't go to a hospital and lie to the doctor about what you're feeling, because then the doctor doesn't know how to help you.
That's right.
Right. And so until he starts using his instruments, so it's very similar to when you come to your first ayahuasca experience, you come with your guard up, but as soon as you step into the ceremony, and I'm starting to help that along that process, then I start to key into the things that you're actually experiencing, including the discomfort of realizing, man, I don't know what's happening to me, in those situations where you start losing control, that's why we respond in the way we do in bringing that comfort and that trust back into the space so that you can navigate it better,
Yeah.
So we cut out the judgment. We cut out a lot of the pre-qualifying, every time I remember the first time you came, for one, you came with someone you deployed with, so there was already that stature, of y'all were telling stories that y'all shared together when y'all deployed together.
Right.
And there were awesome stories, don't get me wrong, but the entire time I was kind of buzzing around like a bee. I was trying to figure out how to separate y'all two and also how to kill the conversation so it didn't spread like wildfire, because y'all are two high-speed airmen, amazing, which, I'm so happy to have you on as a guest because we're redeeming the Air Force by having you here. One of the first episodes, Adam was telling the story about finding out that there was a veteran that can help him. And then, one of the integrators was explaining, he was in the Air Force, and immediately he shot it down. He was like, what's that guy going to do for me? So I'm just happy, to have somebody like you on the show. But your influence, on others was really, really fascinating to me, because you essentially ended up with a group of people just enamored with your stories, with your qualifications and just knowing that you were a PJ was just everyone looked up to you in that moment, So for me, it was a problem. For me, it was that's not why anybody's here. Yeah. But that's not why any of y'all were, including you, were there, right? So I started hey, have you checked into your room yet? And hey, have you picked your mat yet? And tried to diffuse the situation so that we can get the most out of the experience, you know? And it ended up working, I think, at least,
It did.
And it's just, it's important to recognize, that we have to stop associating with our past in order to shape our future. So if we continually carry those stories along with us, then they become us, and then we live to tell those stories rather than living to create.
And I think that's particularly challenging with this demographic.
Absolutely.
The other thing is the ego, and it is almost impossible to get a bunch of veterans and first responders together and ask them to check their ego at the door.
Right.
The butt sniffing is going to happen automatically. But the environment that you've created here very quickly doesn't squash it. It very quickly becomes it's not important. Mm-hmm. Right? Within minutes of going into ceremony, I don't care that this guy was admin and this guy was Delta Force. These are my brothers, and mm-hmm. we're gonna journey together. And that is almost uniquely contributed to the environment that you've created.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the environment that we've created.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. No, and I'm really excited in the future of Agape Heroes. Like we were saying before, we had an announcement to make. I think this is a timely, approach to that announcement. Mm-hmm. We've decided as an organization, Agape Church, to create the Agape Heroes Foundation, which is a 501c3 standalone, separate of the church, to better help veterans. And this foundation aims to eliminate the financial burden that a veteran or a first responder experiences in coming to plant medicine for help and for guidance. So that's usually the first obstacle for a veteran is the cost, and even though we're one of the cheapest, retreats available in the United States, that demographic goes anywhere, that really window of financial burden is anywhere from $500 to $2,500, depending on where you're visiting. So it has become our mission to eliminate that burden for our veterans and first responders. Jeremy has joined us as on the board of directors for the Agape Heroes Foundation, along with Adam, who we all know from previous podcasts, and then our brother Brad. So together, we're going to start shaping this as an actual 501c3 that will be catering to providing peer support, providing retreats, that are specifically designed to help veterans and first responders overcome and really fine tune what it is the program has become at this point, to better serve our communities. So we're really thrilled to bring Jeremy on, and Jeremy, thank you so much for your dedication to the program.
I'm honored. Thanks.
No, absolutely, and I'd love to get an idea of what that not only means to you, but what motivates you to get involved with the Agape Heroes Foundation.
Sure. Mm-hmm. My life is the common thread, the common theme throughout my life has been service. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to joining the military. But more than that, I knew, at 14 years old, I knew I wanted to be in special ops and wanted to freaking jump out of airplanes and shoot bad guys. And, the romanticization of war, and as I got older, I realized that, then I found Pararescue. I got to do all that cool stuff and I get to save people too and score.
Yeah.
And then, after Pararescue, I became, a mental health therapist. And my clientele are strictly first responders and military. Mm-hmm. And this seemed like a natural addition to that, especially considering my participation in plant medicine is what it's done for me. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, this place, Agape, it's unique, and I'm committed to seeing it grow, and I'm committed to share your mission to help veterans and first responders through the use of entheogens, right? And this seemed like a great way to serve, and I truly appreciate you giving me the opportunity.
No, I couldn't have thought of anyone better. It's like I told you initially when I invited you on. I was like, I've got the best three guys that I can think of to help me with what it is that I see this becoming. So I'm really excited, and for different reasons. With your background, already, I remember the conversation we just had, last week, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
You already had suggestions and ways for the program to improve, so that shared excitement is exactly what I was looking for, in finding people who could support this program and develop this program better for the people who are watching this, who may be interested in joining us at some point,
Yeah.
I also very specifically like you on board because I don't look like a veteran, but you look like a veteran, so, and that was one of the initial conversations we had before too, is it's been something that I've been offering for 4 years, right? And it's been a real difficult task for me to get veterans in here because, I won't say that my healing is over ever, right? But that part of me, I've done a really good job at overcoming, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I don't hold on to a lot of it. And every now and then, if I have to get the job done and people aren't listening to me, then you see a bit of that military come back out, but other than that, it just not
going the teepee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the men's retreat. That's exactly right. I completely forgot about that.
I didn't.
Yeah. We got it up. That's good. Yeah, no, that's good. But yeah, exactly. So the identity part of it, I don't carry with me at all anymore, and that's come to bite me in the butt, because it ends up being it's similar to Adams qualifying me. It's just because I was in the Air Force and he was in the Marines, he was like, nah. And then he probably also had to look at me and decided that for himself, the long hair, beard,
hippie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's nice to have support, that fits that narrative too,
sure.
And it's not to speak against it. I don't care what you look like or what you sound like. None of it matters to me so long as you're a better person.
But your point's solid too. I mean, if you've got, we're always going to judge people by appearance,
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got a range, a guy that's, still got his high and tight, still shaves every day, that is speaking the same message as the guy with the beard and the ponytail or the man bun, it's, you see that range, you see that the aperture opens, right? And it's not just, people that are what's the word I'm looking for? That are more esoteric or kind of spiritual versus the guy that's rigid, and you see it in every one of your retreats, whether it's a military, an Agape Heroes retreat or a regular Agape retreat. You see the wide range of people,
right?
But the people that, bringing people in that don't have that experience, they've got preconceived notions of being able to show, show and share success stories that don't match the narrative that they have in their head. I think that's a huge selling point.
Right. No, and that's what we're after, and really it's just an understanding that symbiotic, experience has to exist, where you just recognize, for one, that you're not coming to this retreat for everyone else. Right. You're coming for yourself, right? So to me, that's why I tried again to take away those bits of armor that people have in sharing their stories, because you're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it so that other people will accept you. So you're already approaching it in the, from the wrong lens. Right. You're trying to be accepted for being who you are, and there is
were.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. And people, will come in making excuses for themselves, one of which is I didn't want to come here because this guy looks like a hippie. No, exactly. So no, it's a laughing matter, but by the same token, it's something that exists, that has been people's excuse. They don't think I'm military enough to handle a military situation. I beg to differ.
Sure.
Yeah. But,
well, and you have that, you look at Maslow's hierarchy, you're so much closer to self-actualization than most of your contemporaries, which allows you to do that. A lot of these, most of us coming in are, we are clawing to hang on to our egos, clawing to hang on to that past.
Right.
And that's the beauty of the medicine, is it allows us to release that grip. It's not automatic, but it's incredibly effective. And,
right.
And I'll tell you, I had a blessed career. I got to do some amazing things, and I'm really proud of what I did. But I no longer define who I am based on that.
Right.
And I guarantee you, would not have gotten it. I'm not there all the way. I mean, I still, I'm a work in progress, but I would never have been able to get to where I am now in that process without the help of plant medicine.
No, absolutely.
I mean, 15 years of traditional therapy. I'm a therapist now. 15 years of traditional therapy. Work gets done without a doubt, but not at the soul level. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the difference, with plant medicine is you work at the soul level. You're the therapist. Right. And that's profound.
Right. And really for most people, it's just in recognizing how your behaviors have always been influenced by others, sure. Especially for a military veteran. You are not the same person after the first day of basic training. Already the programming starts, where they're influencing you to be battle ready and take orders or give orders, depending on the situation. It's returning back to that state, of humanity, of like we've discussed before, putting your arms down for the first time in a long time. Setting down the gun and realizing you don't need it anymore to live your life out. Yeah. And so it's an exercise for most, and it was for me. I would imagine it will be for the majority of people who will come and entrust us with their care at Agape Heroes.
Yeah. And your clientele base for Agape Heroes is largely post 9/11. Mm-hmm. Right. And so, you talk about laying down your arms. That's a lot tougher for a combat force, a wartime force, than it is, say, when I came in pre 9/11, the Cold War had just ended and there's really nothing going on. A lot of police force or police actions around the world. But like I said, I largely post 9/11 clientele. That's tough. And I mean, it's really hard because that's what they know. Their military experience is combat, where, a lot of generations didn't have that. Right. Same problems nonetheless, but I think it's far more prolific. And, in addition to that, you find a lot of people that weren't in combat arms that found themselves in combat situations. Mm-hmm. And, they weren't prepared for it. Like they didn't have that what I call prehabilitation, mm-hmm. In the resiliency training. Like, you're a supply troop, get on this 50 cal, go on a convoy. Yeah. Right. I mean, it was just, it was a necessity of war. Mm-hmm. But there's so many, and the psychological effects of that are profound, are huge and widespread. Speaking as a traditional therapist, we just don't have the tools to heal the soul. We can heal the mind. We can help heal the mind. Right. And then, traditional medicine wants to throw a lot of pharmacology at that, mm-hmm. Which, I'm not going to speak poorly of pharmacology. It's got its place. Right. Of course. It's overused, but it's got its place. But this is all natural. This is what comes from God's earth. And, coupled with the integration, coupled with the integrations that you lead, that is the turbocharger in the V8, No, absolutely. Yeah. And it's hard. I'll never talk badly about pharmaceuticals, other than, there was a point where I recognized something was wrong with me because of them. Yeah. And then there was, following that, a point where I recognized that there was something still wrong with me because of them, so it was just like compartmentalizing and setting everything aside so that I couldn't feel what I was feeling, so once that unraveled for me in alcohol and drug abuse is when I realized, wait a second, this thing was helping me, but now I'm still feeling the same call to alcohol and drugs. So was it helping me or was it a Band-Aid, Yeah. And for me, it was a Band-Aid. For a lot of people, it's not. For a lot of people, it's a solution, and they get to live, a normal life and get off of the pharmaceuticals without plant medicine. But for people like me, they need a little something else. Same, yeah. Here, I mean, I was on, when I went to my first ceremony, I think I was on 17 different medications. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm on 2 now. So, yeah. And the big ones were the pain medications, the anxiety, the benzodiazepine, anxiety medications, and then your antidepressants like your SSRIs, SNRIs, off all that. I've been off it since our first ceremony here.
Yeah.
I came off before the ceremony and never went back on.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, I mean, my medicine cabinet's a lot more organized now.
No, of course. Yeah, mine became a trash can, no different than yours. Like I got to throw away 11. Like after my first experience, I never took any pharmaceutical again. Thankfully. And I know that struggle exists with other people differently. So it's just a glimmer of hope, that we can instill in people, that eventually, once you come to a better understanding of the situation, you can better approach and handle the situation. Yeah. You brought up something really important that I'd like to touch on before we close out, and that's the integration process of all of this. Most people know the glitz and glamour of the stories that Aaron Rodgers and Machine Gun Kelly share about the benefits of ayahuasca, but where I feel the sustainability of these experiences and really, transforming these experiences into lessons that we can apply in our life lies within integration.
Without a doubt.
So if you would just kind of dive into what that process has looked like for you and what was effective, and what that helped unearth in your healing process. Yeah.
So, obviously the dissociative aspects of ayahuasca, will leave you, personally left me in a state of, okay, I saw this, I felt this, I thought this, but I didn't exactly know what it meant, right? Or how the pieces fit together. And ultimately they do. They all fit together. I just don't know how. I didn't know how to put that together. And so, sitting in integration, for those of you who don't know, it's kind of like group therapy after a ceremony, where experienced leaders like Sergio will, you share your experience, and then he'll help you start putting those puzzle pieces back together. What I find unique about your style of integration, and it blows my mind, is you've got a story and example for any share, regardless of the background, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what they've experienced. You have a way to weaving their story into, the fable, into like the lesson, which is, that's a talent. Like I've been through a lot of integrations, and I've never seen it to that level. If somebody shares a story and then you relate to it, it's very easy to do that. But, you've got an African-American female, talking about, past sexual trauma and what she saw in ayahuasca, and you've got something that's just profound. And you connect, you connect with your guests in a way that, is unique. And, so that was very helpful. But partaking in the medicine and going on your way, I'm sure has some benefit, but it's far from the potential of the entheogens, and the requirement, or not the requirement, but the necessity of getting together in a group, sharing what you experienced, and then having that experienced person help you put those pieces together. And granted, for a week or two afterwards, your own mind's going to start putting those puzzles together. But it's like, you're the match to the kindling, right? So you get that fire burning. You get them put the pieces together enough that they can go home, and now they can start thinking about, all right, but I absolutely agree. It's absolutely critical to the healing process, to get into the integration process. And without it, I would see no reason to come here and partake of the sacrament and go home, wondering what the heck I just experienced,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, of course. And it blows my mind that some people do come with that expectation, just to have the experience, because this experience in particular with ayahuasca holds so many answers, so many, different perspectives, different angles, and the life we've experienced that allow us to just kind of think differently. live life through somebody else's eyes for a moment that was in the same situation that impacted you so heavily,
Right.
like those opportunities to me are where the treasure is to be found, and that's what I try to simulate in the integration process, is offering just enough of a different perspective of what it is that you held on to from your experience to allow you to navigate it, like possibly through an easier route.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things, especially as like how mental patterns, evolve. They're like walking through grass. If you take the same route through your lawn every day, you're going to expect to start missing grass in that same route,
Right.
Like, so what I try to do is veer you back onto the concrete, like, and just put you in a position where you are thinking and looking at the situation a little bit differently, and then from then on, it's just allows you to further work with that process in a way that's sustainable for you.
I would take it a step further though. Obviously, ayahuasca has, makes your brain very plastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Facilitates neuroplasticity, building different nerve pathways. And when you're running integration, you're putting, I call mind viruses, right? You're putting these little ideas in people's heads that the brain physiologically clicks on. Mm-hmm. and helps with that neuroplasticity, creating those new, I think it was you that told me if you want to start a new habit, start it after ceremony.
Right.
And that's how I did it. Mm-hmm. Literally, if I want to make it a rather, substantial, lifestyle change, I will come to ceremony before I start that. And I wouldn't have known that had I not been in integration, mm-hmm. And then educating people too about the medicine,
right?
Hey, this is what you went through. You and Mr. Cole do a very good job of orientating the new guest, someone who's never done entheogens before, about what to expect. But you can tell somebody what to expect, but then when you talk about what they experienced, obviously it hits harder. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's another critical aspect of integration.
No, of course. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up orientation too, because the big secret sauce there for us is just expressing our own humanity and allowing people to realize that we're not these elevated people, that we're actually not very long ago, we were on the same mat as they were, in the same situation, with the same trust issues and the same, right. history and baggage that we showed up to ceremony to help with, Like, so it's for us, where communities disconnect from reality in that way, like where they feel the way to regain, trust in the ceremony space and create reverence in the ceremony space is through theater, through acting like they don't have the problems that they actually have, like, and pretending to be spiritual, pretending to be okay, pretending that their healing is over. I don't believe that for a second for a majority of people.
When we come in ceremony, that's the great equalizer. You don't get to fake it anymore.
Yeah, no, and that's why one of the adjustments we've made over the years is now we share the space in as much of a circle as we can. We have a temple that's a rectangle.
Right,
so it can't ever be a perfect circle. But in either case, the idea is shoulder to shoulder. So that no matter what, you're sitting across from another human being. And that in itself is a great equalizer. If you end up even elevated a little higher than the other people in the ceremony space, you feel that difference, and we try to avoid that as best we can.
The subconscious mind picks up on that stuff too. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. No, of course. Yeah. And the more you can trust into the idea that we're all there to support each other, the more supported you feel, like if it's a conscious reminder that, I need to keep looking at the shaman or the facilitator, give it whatever name you want to give it, to make sure that I'm doing okay, rather than just, assessing your surroundings and saying everybody else is chill, I should be chill too,
Sure.
Like that allows the space to conform a little better to an understanding that what we're doing is safe and what we're doing is helping. And we're doing it for the right reasons, So it's definitely something we paid attention to in the design of our retreats, so I appreciate you pointing out that it was noticeable for sure.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Well, we've covered a lot in this episode. I don't know how long it's been, but in either case, every minute of it was worth it. I
enjoyed myself very much. I appreciate you having me.
Of course. And I know you're fresh to Agape Heroes, but if you feel you want to share about anything else you're involved with, how people can get a hold of you if they want support, things like that, you're more than welcome to introduce yourself in that way.
I don't feel fully qualified to take on your audience, to help out. I mean, obviously, come to ceremony. That's number one. I came here today with two young ladies from Wyoming, and it's their first ceremony. They're scared. They're nervous. They don't know, but I introduced them to. They asked me. They just simply asked me. They've known me for a while. One of the ladies, she's known me for 20 years, and she met me 20 years ago, and thought I was a complete asshole, and I was. But she simply asked me when we reconnected, a couple of months ago, and she's like, "What? I mean, what? There's this enormous change in who you are, and what is it?" And I'm like, "Well, age, wisdom, maturity." I said, "But more importantly," and I said, "You ever heard of ayahuasca?" And we had a discussion, and then, you guys offer a women's retreat. And so I brought them here. I say that to say this, they're frightened, right? They're nervous, not frightened, they're nervous. And that's understandable. We're all wary of the unknown. But I would say to my fellow veterans and first responders, cowboy up, because this is a life-altering experience. And it will heal. It will. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest once again. This has been another episode of the Heroes of Agape podcast. I'm sure we're going to have Jeremy back because he's now directly involved with our organization. So hopefully I'll have him interview somebody in a future episode, possibly a friend, something like that. So if you have any ideas, no, you're good, man. This is for veterans and first.
That's true. That's true. I don't think they'd understand me if I didn't drop that bomb in there.
They wouldn't believe you.
Right.
Yeah, but no, in either case, thank y'all so much for joining us. If you would share this content with somebody you feel can find some truth in the message or realize that this is something that could help them. We're on all platforms, on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, so you can follow Agape Heroes there. You can also visit our website. Currently, it's www.agape4smb, and that's the number 4.com. /Agape Heroes. That's our information page. We're in the process of building the agapeheroes.org website. That'll be for Agape Heroes Foundation, which I'm pleased again to announce that that nonprofit has been approved by the state of Texas, and we're currently just pending our 501c3 application with the IRS to fully become a 501c3 nonprofit. So news for you. I don't know if I had mentioned that.
Hey, we've got 87,000 new IRS agents. Maybe that'll help speed the process.
No, exactly. So hopefully we get news on that front here soon, and we can get the job done. For anyone who's interested in supporting our veterans and first responders, feel free to contact us by any means. You can send us email at info@agape4smb.com or heroes@agape4smb.com. You can also send us a direct message or a comment on the platform that you're watching this on. But nonetheless, thank y'all so much for being here. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.